not sure if there's anyone here. Yes, maybe Olga, the name Francis Nolan will mean something to you. He was David's supervisor. So certainly a big name in forensic linguistics. Yes, it means something to James as well. So yeah, and then after his PhD, apart from a couple of little jobs like we all have, he spent, I'm trying to look, 15 years at the National Institute of Education in Singapore. And then he left Singapore in 2007, and until now, he's been at the University of Brunei Darussalam. I hope I've said that okay. Probably not. Darussalam?
Darussalam, yeah, Darussalam.
Darussalam. Okay, I knew I hadn't said it right. And where he's about to retire. So that's why he's coming to be with us and spend time with family in Melbourne. So at his university, he's been teaching phonetics, forensic linguistics, Malay English translation, history of English, and research methods in linguistics. He's on the editorial board of several journals: Journal of Second Language Pronunciation, Journal of English as a Lingua Franca, TESOL Quarterly, English Worldwide, Asian Journal of English Language Teaching. And he's also taken on the series editor of the Cambridge University Press Elements in Phonetics, and I'm sure he's happy to talk to anyone who would be interested in contributing to that series. He's author of 7 books and editor of 6, with the 7th on the way. And apart from the editorial boards I've just mentioned, he's also published in the Journal of the International Phonetic Association, Journal of Phonetics, World Englishes, Asiatic, and Chinese Journal of Applied Linguistics. So I guess you get the idea of where his interests, research interests lie. Certainly those different varieties of English spoken around parts of Southeast Asia. So yeah, we're very pleased to welcome him as I think you're our first international guest in our series. So thank you so much for making the time to be with us. We're so happy.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a great honor to talk to you. It saddens me I'm not able to talk to you in person, but maybe this will work. And indeed, we can get international participants as well. So it's great to see you, and I look forward to seeing you, most of you in person, when I move to Melbourne later this year. So now I will switch to my screen, and this should, let's hope. So share. There we are. I hope you can all see that. So my talk today is Indigenous Languages and English in the Globalized Modern Era in Brunei Darussalam. First of all, let me introduce Brunei a little bit. Brunei, I've given you a map there to show where we are. Was kind of surrounded by Malaysia. You can see Sarawak and Sabah are states of Malaysia, and we are actually surrounded entirely by Sarawak, except for the South China Sea to the north. To put it a little bit larger, that's what it looks like. Sarawak is all around us, South China Sea to the north. I'm going to mention BSB, the capital, in the talk, and Limbang also will come in at some point. So that's a map. Now, Brunei is very small. It is also very green. So I wanted to, its size.
David, I'm just going to interrupt you because up on the chat, everyone is seeing a black box.
Is that right? Okay, let me, sorry, let me see what's happened there.
There's a black rectangle on top, yeah, and you've just moved, yeah, you've been moving them.
Okay, so you can't see that.
We can see your slides, but you've got black boxes covering things. I don't know what's going on.
Let me try that. So I need to screen sharing. So I've got black boxes covering. So if I get rid of that.
Okay, share your screen for the PowerPoint.
Sharing screen. So is that not? But you can see my screen. But what can't you see?
Ah, you've been changing the black boxes.
Sorry.
You've been changing the black boxes. They're changing shape. Okay, stop. Don't do anything more. Stop.
That's good now, is it?
It'll work now. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Right. So, right there, I wanted to give you. Can you see that? I wanted to just give you a comparison to get an idea. We're about less than a tenth of the size of Tasmania, but we have a similar population. So actually, Tasmania is less densely populated, but the population density in Brunei is not very big. So we're a very small country with a population a little less than 500,000. Now, one of the things about Brunei is we have a lot of forest. Supposedly, we have more primary forest as a percentage than any other country in the world. I thought I'd give you a view of the forest. That's not maybe very spectacular to you, but to me it is, because it's actually the view from my living room. In fact, that's the view I'm looking at now over my computer, so I'm quite fond of that view. So we have a lot of forest. This is the forest, this is actually from my bathroom. I thought this is interesting. This is when I first arrived 13 years ago, and that's now. So some forest disappears, but actually it's getting better in many ways. So in some places it's getting better. So I'm quite, I have greenery all around me. So that's nice. Okay, move on to presentation. I'm going to talk about 4 things: the status of indigenous minority languages, efforts to protect the indigenous languages, the status of English, and then tied it up with languages in Brunei in a globalized world. So we start off with the indigenous minority languages. There are officially recognized 7 indigenous languages in Brunei: Malay, Kedayan, Dusun, Bisaya, Tutong, Malite, and Murut, also known as Lun Bawang. They're all regarded as dialects of Malay, but that's open to question. I'm going to look at that in a moment, whether they could be regarded as dialects or whether they're separate languages. And finally, we'll ask whether you can really separate varieties of language into separate languages. That's something we will look at right at the end. Okay, let's go through them now. I'm just going to give you an illustration, very brief illustration. I hope that you can hear. This is Standard Malay.
Ketika angin utara dan matahari sedang bertengkar mengenai siapa yang lebih kuat, datang seorang pengembara yang memakai jubah.
That says, when the north wind and the sun were disputing which was the stronger, along came a traveler wrapped in a cloak. Now I'll give you the same passage in Brunei Malay.
Masa si angin utara sama si matahari bertengkar pasal siapa yang lagi kuat, ada dia orang pengembara datang.
I don't know if you can hear, it's sort of similar in many ways, but let me now give you one of the other ones, which is Dusun.
Pak Ilongos Utara, maya I matoa daw bertengkar pasal iso yang lagi kuat. Ono jelama pengembara ikut.
I don't know if you can hear it. It sounds very different. Maybe if they all sound strange, it's hard to hear. But let's do soon a moment. And just to highlight a few things about Dusun. The first phrase on that, which is some interesting things there. The R is a R sound, and notice you have a pre-nasalized plosive with an M before it, pre-nasalized plosive. So that's a okay, and listen to the Okay, so that's Dusun. Let's now compare these 7 indigenous languages. And what I did here was to take this dictionary or this list of words in the 7 languages, or 7 dialects they're called, and see which ones are similar and which ones are different. So, for example, take the word bike. Actually, it's pronounced bite with a glottal stop at the end. Bite. Standard Malay is bite. Brunei Malay is bite. Kedayan is bite. Dusun is monchoy. Bisaya is monchoy. Tutong is diak. Balite is diek. And Murut is dot. So what do we see here? Notice that those 3 are the same. Standard Malay, Brunei Malay, Kedayan are the same. Notice that Dusun and Bisaya are the same. Notice that Tutong and Balite are very similar, and Murut is completely different. This is a pattern we find, but a different pattern is here. This is back to a cough. Standard Malay, Brunei Malay, and Kedayan are still the same. Dusun Bisaya, Bagusai, the same. In this case, Tutong and Belait are actually completely different. And once again, Murut is completely different. Now, that's just 2 words, but let's look at the, I analyzed the whole lot, but I'll just present for the first 255 words in there. This is a level of lexical cognates. If we look at the first 3, we see that the level of lexical cognates between Standard Malay, Brunei Malay, and Kedayan is very high. Dusun and Bisaya is also very high. They're very similar, those 2. Tutong and Belait are not so high. They may be linked, but really the level of lexical cognates is not too high. And the last one, Murut, is completely different. Okay, so that's the conclusions when we analyze these different languages, different varieties in Brunei. Standard Malay, Brunei Malay, Kedayan are all dialects of Malay. The numbers are different from what's been reported by Notofer 1991, but the pattern is similar. Dusun and Bisaya are similar. Again, the numbers are lower, but really quite high. There's little evidence that Tutong and Belait are linked, and Murut is distinct. So that's a very brief summary of the status of those indigenous languages. Now, in fact, there are some other indigenous languages in Brunei. There's Iban and Penan. Iban is spoken quite widely in Sarawak. It's not accepted as an indigenous language of Brunei, even though there's in fact quite a lot of Iban people here. In fact, it's quite similar to Malay. But, and it's more similar to Malay than Dusun and Murut are, but it's not accepted as an indigenous language. I just thought it was interesting. I mentioned Limbang at the beginning. Remember, it's across the border in Malaysia. I went to Limbang and I saw this sign. I thought this very interesting. The top is in Malay, Jangan membuang sampah merata. Merata denda $500. That's don't throw rubbish. The fine is $500. The bottom is Chinese. 无乱丢垃圾为止罚款500块. But notice the middle. The middle is Iban. You would never ever see that sign in Brunei because Iban is never printed, never seen printed, and never written. In fact, the indigenous languages are almost never written, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so now let's look at what the status of the languages are. Let's start, for example, looking at the pressures from Malay. This is a road sign in Brunei. I drive past this every day. It's written, it says Utamakan Bahasa Melayu, which is prioritize the Malay language. It's written in 2 different scripts. The top is in what we call Jawi script. It's based on Arabic, and the bottom is Rumi script based on Roman or English. They say the same things, just written in different ways. But notice that you have a road sign encouraging you to speak language, speak Malay language, which is, I can't imagine many other countries. I can't think of any other language, any other countries where that would be the case, where there is road signs. I can't imagine coming out of Heathrow or out of Melbourne Airport and seeing a sign, speak English. But we have that in Brunei. This is actually the same road sign from a different angle. It's a 3-sided. The Malay, Bahasa Melayu, Bahasa Rasmi Negara. The Malay language is the official language of the country. I find this also interesting. This is a mural on the wall of the library in the capital city. And in the mural, it has this same Ber Bahasa Satu, Ber Bahasa, Ber Bangsa Satu, Ber Negara Satu. One language, one race, one nation, which is not very encouraging for the preservation of minority languages. So it seems there's a lot of pressure from Malay and not much support for indigenous languages. And that seems to be true, but maybe there is a little bit of support. Nur Azam, Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at my university, has described this as there being the minority languages, the indigenous languages are being squeezed out by the existence of dueling aunties, Malay and English, squeezing out their nephew. Okay, now I said that the indigenous languages, apart from Malay, are never written, but occasionally you see Brunei Malay written. This is actually on a forest path. And I just thought it was interesting because it's Brunei Malay. I can't even. Ada sudah rasanya. Are you already tired? I think it's now. How do you feel? Sorry, it's how do you feel? You do occasionally see Brunei Malay written. Maybe with the internet now and sharing things electronically, maybe it's becoming more. This is a book. It is published as well. Now, it's in Standard Malay, but the conversation is in Brunei Malay. So maybe Brunei Malay is sometimes written now. Okay, let's think about linguistic landscape. Look at the environment and see what languages you see in the environment as a reflection of the status of those languages. Malay is written often both in Jawi and in Rumi. Legally, all signs must have those languages, and Jawi should be twice the size of Rumi. We'll see that's not always observed. Other languages, English is often seen, Chinese is sometimes found, and there's almost no evidence of any of the other languages anywhere on official signs or on shop signs, private signs as well. So to give some examples, this is from Paolo Coluzzi's 2012 paper. Here we have Jawi at the top, which I can't read Jawi, but I guess it says metro parking. And the second is either, well, it could be English. I think it's English, you'd have to say, but it could be Malay, I guess, because there wouldn't be a difference. That's interesting because it's in Malay and English. That is actually breaking the law, isn't it? Because there is no Jawi there. You're supposed to have Jawi on all signs, but we have Malay and English. And here we have a more mixed sign. We have Jawi at the top. We have Malay, so Malay, Jawi, and Rumi. Jawi is at least twice the size of everything else, so that's good. We have the Chinese. It's quite interesting this because the Jawi goes right to left. The Malay, the Rumi Malay goes left to right. The Chinese goes right to left, Sheng Li Yang Fu, and the English goes left to right. So you have 4 different languages on that. And you almost never see Brunei Malay. Now this is the only example, any shop sign we've found. This is from my student Susilawati, who found a single sign which might be Brunei Malay. Kidi Aku, which is a joke because it's a children's play center, so it's Kidi or Chidi, and Aku means my, so it kind of means my kid, my child. Maybe you could say that that is Brunei Malay. Okay, that's the linguistic landscape of Brunei. Very little evidence for indigenous languages. I did say that there was little support for indigenous languages, but we do find a little bit. Let's have a look at some. There are dictionaries. There are labeling of plant names occasionally uses indigenous languages, and we've done some work trying to describe them. So let's start with dictionaries. We start with this one, which we've already seen. This lists the about 2,000 words, and it gives the equivalent in all 7 dialects or languages, if you prefer. This is a dictionary of Brunei Malay, which is absolutely excellent. There's a dictionary of Kedayan and a dictionary of Tutong. So there are some materials being published, which is encouraging. Plant names. If you walk through the forest, this is a plant name. This is a nipong, which is a kind of palm, I guess. and it is labeled in Brunei Malay. This here is Costa species, which is a kind of ginger plant, and it is labeled here in Kadayan. So somebody has gone to find the plant names and is trying to keep a record of them to preserve the traditional names of plants. This here is Goniathalamus, I don't know, it's a kind of tree, kind of shrub, and it has been labeled in Dusun, which is encouraging. So there is a little bit of support for preserving traditional names of plants and things like that. And at UBD, we've been doing some research on pronunciation to try to make a record of the language. This here, this was published in Journal International Phonetics Association. I put a website for it. So research on Standard Malay, but also I've done one on Brunei Malay. And this one we just published in our own journal on Dusun. So there is some research to record these languages. You can look at those sites and you can actually listen to them from those sites. Okay, so a summary of the support for indigenous languages. The Dewan Bahasa Pustaka is the Language and Literature Bureau. It publishes some dictionaries. Some trees, plants, and shrubs are labeled with traditional names. Some work is done on pronunciation. There are also some courses at my university, UBD, on Dusun and Tutong. Is that enough to preserve them, or are they doomed? It's hard to tell that. We'll come back to the prognosis at the end. But the current situation, we'll look at the final prognosis at the end, but the current situation, my colleagues Nur Azam and Siti Ajira say that Brunei Malay is perfectly healthy, but all the others are under threat. Belite is almost completely extinct, and the other five dialect or languages are under severe threat. So things don't look too good, but we hope that with efforts to preserve them with dictionaries and other things, maybe there is some hope. Murat, Paolo Coluzzi claims it's relatively healthy. The reason for that is that it's actually supported in Laos across the border in Sarawak, where you can find some newspapers and some radio programs. So that is relatively healthy. Now we go on to English and then we'll tidy up and summarize. Okay, the status of Brunei English. First of all, does Brunei English really exist, or is it a distinct variety or not? In Schneider's book, which I use a lot, unfortunately, he never made any mention of Brunei English, which I think is unfortunate, but never mind. We have done some work on it in 2013 book, and we put it in the middle phase 3, which is called nativization. We think that maybe it's moving on towards phase 4, but it's certainly not at the same stage as Singapore English. Maybe it's similar to Malaysian English. Okay, this is a book I wrote in 2013 with my colleague Salbrina Shabawi. I'm going to describe just a few features of pronunciation, grammar, and lexis to give you a slight taste of the flavor of Brunei English, and then we'll look at its status. This is obviously just a very short summary of a few features. It is becoming rhotic. I'll come to that in a minute, and it seems to be changing quite fast now. Secondly, vowels, the a and a vowels, so a and a, the trap and face vowels seem to be merged. There is an absence of reduced vowels and quite wide occurrence of spelling pronunciation. Let's start with rhoticity. I think you know what rhoticity is. It means that R is pronounced wherever R occurs in the pronunciation. A rhotic accent for, car, work, and starting would all have R. Most speakers of American English are rhotic. Philippine English is also rhotic. My pronunciation is not rhotic. We would expect Brunei English not to be rhotic because of the influence of British English, but that actually turns out to be changing. I'll just give you a brief, let you judge. I'll play you 8 people saying this sentence. This was recorded in about 2010. You judge yourself how many of these are rhotic or not. Listen for coarse, louder, and before. Do they have an R or not? That's number 1.
Racing down to the village, the boy, of course, cried out even louder than before.
Number 2.
Racing down to the village, the boy, of course, cried out even louder than before.
Number 3.
Racing down to the village, the boy, of course, cried out even louder than before.
Number 4.
Racing down to the village, the boy, of course, cried out even louder than before.
Number 5.
Racing down to the village, the boy, of course, cried out even louder than before.
Number 6.
Racing down to the village, the boy, of course, cried out even louder than before.
Number 7.
Racing down to the village, the boy, of course, cried out even louder than before.
Number 8.
Racing down to the village, the boy, of course, cried out even louder than before.
I don't know what I hear about half of them as being rhotic. People differ, but about half. What we usually find is about 50% of people are rhotic. This is recorded about 10 years ago. I said, but look, so this is what we analyzed there, and we concluded that almost exactly half of the students were rhotic, though less than half of the tokens were rhotic, but most or half students had some rhoticity, and you could classify them as basically sort of rhotic. But look at what's happening now. This is really interesting to look at the early recordings compared to the later ones. Notice that in more recent recordings, 19 out of 21 were rhotic, whereas in the earlier recordings, like the ones you just listened to, again, about 50% are rhotic. So it seems that in just a few years shift, in 2013, nearly everybody is rhotic. And now when I ask my students, are you rhotic or not? I did it this semester. Nearly everybody says, yes, I have a rhotic accent. So there seems to be quite a substantial shift, really quite short time span, a really substantial shift in pronunciation, which suggests that Brunei English is developing, and we could say that it's in phase 4 of the dynamic model. Okay, so conclusion, rhoticity. Brunei English seems to be becoming rhotic. Recent research suggests nearly all younger people now have a rhotic accent. And we think there are 4 different reasons for that. First, Brunei Malay is rhotic. That is perhaps the most important influence. But secondly, American English is rhotic, and people listen to a lot of American English movies and music. Philippines English is rhotic, and there are quite a lot of Filipino people here, not just domestic helpers, but teachers. And spelling pronunciation. Notice that rhoticity reflects the spelling quite closely. So those 4 influences seem to be impacting on the pronunciation of Brunei English. We go on to the next thing, trap and face. This is something that we have found in Brunei, has not been found elsewhere. I'm using lexical keywords of Wells. I listen to how the word safety is said.
Full of concern for his safety.
Safety. I hear safety rather than safety.
Full of concern for his safety.
Safety. Quite interesting to do transcription, because that can quite often reveal how people pronounce words. Notice that this student who's learning transcription, his transcription is pretty good. He's got the standard stress placement. He's got all the symbols wrong, except he's switched the face and trap vowels. In tenacity, he's got the trap vowel, and fatalistic, he's got them wrong. He's got them the wrong way around, right? So he's got the face vowel in tenacity, and he's got trap in fatalistic. So this confirms it. This is a recording that my student Irma did in 2013. It's her son getting a snack out of the fridge, and he says corn flax. Okay. Next issue is vowel reduction. Now, this lack of vowel reduction is very, very common in world Englishes. In British American English, we say of, us, and then. Brunei, these would be of, as, and than, or maybe dan. So Brunei English avoids vowel reduction in function words. Listen to how that had is said.
A wolf that had just escaped from the zoo.
Now she's quite fluent, speaking quite fast, but she has that had.
A wolf that had just escaped from the zoo.
I don't know if you can hear that. Next one.
A wolf that had
just the same.
A wolf that had just escaped from the zoo.
Okay, that had.
A wolf that had just escaped from the zoo.
Much slower, but that had. And the last one?
A wolf that had just escaped from a zoo.
Maybe that, but it certainly had. So Bruneians tend to avoid reduced vowels in function words. It's sometimes also in other words. So listen to how Japan, it says it's Japan.
I want to go to Japan first.
Japan. Maybe even stress on the first syllable.
I want to go to Japan first.
And Korea.
My first choice would be to live in Korea.
Maybe.
My first choice would be to live in Korea.
I always tell my students, if you say Korea with a full vowel in the first syllable, Korea, then keep it. Because there's nobody will ever misunderstand you if you say Korea. But if you say Korea like I do, then people will actually sometimes misunderstand you. Because to me, Korea, as in a job you're going to do, and Korea, the place, are pronounced the same. But I don't think any of my students have those as homophones. They would all make a distinction between Korea and Korea. So maybe keeping a spelling pronunciation actually is not such a bad idea for use as world Englishes. It's also interesting to note that in air traffic control, pilots and air traffic controllers are actually required to pronounce words as 100 and 1,000. It's not 100 and 1,000, it's 100 and 1,000. So in air traffic control, you're not supposed to use reduced vowels. So in the air traffic control, they are encouraged to use full vowels, or they're required to use full vowels. So if you use full vowels in these words, why not keep it? That's what I encourage my students. I think that is becoming more and more common throughout the world. Actually, it's becoming common in British English as well. How do you say hexagon or hexagon? Nowadays, people increasingly say hexagon. Traditionally, it was mosquito. Now it's mosquito. So maybe even British English is changing. Okay, so this comes into the domain of spelling pronunciation. Nowadays, most people can read, and the spelling of words increasingly affects their pronunciation, especially for less common words. Sometimes words revert to their original pronunciation. Let's look at the forehead. I say forehead, but most people now say forehead. Often is winning. I'm not sure. I think I have an L there. Almond. It was traditionally almond. Now it's almond, maybe. Constable. Now it used to be constable. Now it's become constable, I guess, for some people. I don't have this one, but increasingly people do. A lot of people in Brunei don't say tortoise, they say tortoise. And et and eight, well, let's look at that one. Notice almost it's 50-50. So most people in Britain say et, but some people say eight. But look at what the younger people are doing. Clearly, eight is winning. So quite clearly, the future, everybody will say eight, just like everybody now says forehead and doesn't say forehead. And notice this is actually a common word. So spelling pronunciation is influencing the way we speak throughout the language. but it's particularly common in places like Brunei and in Singapore. Salmon is pronounced as salmon with an L. Company is pronounced as company with an O, company rather than company, by about half of my students. I've got just a couple of examples.
Every Monday and Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Every Monday and Wednesday.
You can even see that in this case the spectrogram in fact helps you see it.
Every Monday and Wednesday.
You can see there's 3 syllables in Wednesday. I'm missing out a vowel. Wednesday. I should have an extra vowel. That's a Wednesday. So the EW is one way around. There we need to fix that. Calming.
I like it because it's calming.
Calming. I should go back and fix that one. Can I go back and fix that one? There we are. Should be Wednesday. There we are. That's it. That's better. Right. Save that. Go back to that. There we are. Wednesday.
Every Monday and Wednesday.
In Wednesday. And calming. Now, I thought that's spelling pronunciation, but then I did think, well, I should look it up.
I like it because it's calming.
I wonder. Actually, then I looked it up and I found that in American English, it seems it occurs, but even in British English, it sometimes occurs. Wells allows calm as one variety, so I should be careful about that. Maybe that everybody is saying calming now. I don't know. So we move on to grammar. Let's see how Brunei English grammar is evolving and developing. The use of furnitures and advices and things like that. Notice that after one of, we have a singular noun. I haven't heard of that elsewhere, but that's very, very common here. And affirmative answers to negative questions. So we start with furnitures, plural nouns. There's a strong tendency in Brunei and in Singapore and everywhere. It's in Asia and in Africa to use words like furnitures. Notice this is a sign from my university, caution heavy equipments crossing with a plural S. I love this sign, fresh fruits and veggie. Standard English would have veggies, but not fruits, which is illogical. So quite often the evolution of Brunei English is making things more logical. I mean, if you can count vegetables, why not count fruits as well? So fruits is the standard here. And we notice that even in the newspapers, we find accommodations and accommodations. This is the newspaper which prides itself on using standard English, but accommodations with an S seems to be established. I thought I'd better look up and see whether that is actually becoming acceptable in the world. So I looked it up in the Corpus of Contemporary American English, which is an excellent resource. And I found that there's 3,753 tokens of accommodations. So it seems to be occurring everywhere now. So I guess Brunei is leading the way. Everybody is having accommodations now. Researches, well, it was maybe that one is also winning. Maybe people now, I did look that one. I haven't given you the numbers, but that researches as a plural noun occurs also in COCA. If you search for the researches or my researches, you'll find it does occur. Not very often, but it does occur. So maybe that is another one that is becoming established. Next one, one of. One of Brunei's main initiative. No S on initiative. One of boy is friends. No S on friends. This is very common. And finally, affirmative answers to negative questions. This you hear all the time. You don't have any money? No. It's agreeing with me. Standard English, no. But learners of English and users of world Englishes find that very difficult. They think that if you agree with somebody, you should say yes. So you don't have any money? Yes. Okay, let's just listen to that briefly.
Can you speak Javanese?
I cannot speak Japanese. Yes.
So she says yes.
But you don't remember that now.
Yes, I don't remember.
Yes, I don't remember. In standard English, no, I don't remember. But I think in world Englishes and in Brunei, it's yes, I don't remember. Okay, lexical words from Brunei, from Malay, basically. Tita is a speech by the Sultan, and even in the local newspapers, tita is used quite commonly. So that goes into a standard English as it occurs in Brunei. Basambah, which is a gift to the Sultan. Wherever he goes anywhere, every meeting he goes to, every visit he makes, you have to give him a present. When he comes to my university once a year for the graduation ceremony, we have to give him a present. I don't know what he does with all of them, but he has lots and lots of these pasambas. And notice the newspaper, sometimes they put it in quotes, sometimes they put it in italics, and sometimes they just put it in standard font. So that becomes part of standard Brunei English. And finally, some types of food, ambuyat, which is made out of sago. It's horrible stuff, but people here seem to love it. It's very gooey, and then you have that sauce at the top. Anyway, it's hard to translate it, so they use the word. Actually, sago is from Malay as well, which is pronounced sagu. It's a Malay word, so but that is standard English, but I don't think ambuyat is yet. This nasi kotok, which is fried rice and chicken, fried chicken and rice, that seems to occur sometimes in standard English here. Okay, the final topic, and then we'll finish off. Global trends. Where are things going? We've seen some things happening in Brunei English. Some of these follow global trends. I think all of those issues, lack of vowel reduction, spelling pronunciation, local, logical plurals, and affirmative answers to negative questions follow global trends. But some things in Brunei English maybe are not following global trends. Rhoticity, I'm not sure, but a lot of Englishes in the world are not rhotic. Merging of trap and face, that seems to be idiosyncratic for Brunei. I haven't heard of that before, one of my cousin, no S, one of my aunt, and obviously these words tita, basambah, ambuyet, and nasi katok would not be found in standard English or elsewhere. So you get two different trends. You get globalizing trends and local trends. What is the prognosis for Brunei? Will it progress to phase 4? Maybe it is already progressing to phase 4. But at the same time, maybe it will be influenced by global trends as people travel more, although not so much at the moment, obviously, but they interact more internationally. Maybe global trends will influence Brunei. What about the prognosis for minority languages? Will they be squeezed out by English and Malay? Or will the internet provide facilities for them to be saved and maybe even to thrive? Maybe social media will allow minority languages to be written more widely and therefore to survive. Final ideas, final things to think about. Do individual languages exist? Can we actually identify a language as Kedayan? I mean, when I recorded people speaking Kedayan, but it's very, very difficult to get anybody to speak pure Kedayan. As soon as you get to record somebody, they will put in lots and lots of words of Malay and English. So does Kedayan even exist anymore? Are Dusun and Bisaya different languages or different dialects of the same language? Nobody can ascertain that for certain. They can debate it. And does Brunei English exist, or is it just part of World English with a few local idiosyncrasies? Okay, that's all my references there. If you have the handout, you can see those. So what do I do now? I say stop here, is that right? So I stop here and then you don't see my slide, that's right. Okay, any questions on that? I hope that not too overwhelming.
Great, thank you. Maria, do you want to handle the questions?
Oh, no, thank you very much. I was just following the chat. I know that presenters can't follow chat. So I just thought there was maybe 1 or 2 questions that haven't been, I thought was worth if anyone has any other questions, but I noticed that James asked a question when you were playing the sentence with course and I can't remember the other words, the erotic sentence. He asked, do all the participants have the same ethnic background?
Okay. To be honest, I can't say, I should look into that. I believe that some of the speakers I was playing, most of them were Malay and a few of them were Chinese. I would have to look into that, but there is varied ethnic background in that. And indeed, that is an influence. But what we have found actually is that ethnic background doesn't seem to be an influence on rhoticity, which is quite surprising. And the reason for that is that sorry, you want my video on? Let me put,
yeah, that'd be good. Thanks.
let me put my video on.
So people can see you talking.
Why is it? I don't have a single. So.
I don't know if we can turn
my video. There we are. There we are. There you are. Sorry. Yes, indeed.
Okay.
My video on. Right. We have actually looked. You would expect Malays to have a more rhotic accent than Chinese, because Brunei Malay is rhotic and Chinese is basically not rhotic. Beijing Chinese is rhotic, but nobody here speaks Beijing Chinese. And local Chinese is definitely not rhotic. You would expect, therefore, Malays to have more rhoticity, more rhotic English than Brunei, than Chinese. But we didn't find that to be the case. We found it very similar. So yeah, but I should have stuck with a single ethnicity there. Yeah.
Okay. Jonathan is asking, what is the local Chinese? Hokkien?
Okay. The local Chinese is Hokkien is the dominant dialect, but in fact, only older people speak Hokkien. I don't think I've met any younger people who can speak Hokkien, which means that young people basically can't speak to their grandparents in their dialect, which is what we find also in Singapore, where young people often don't have access to their heritage language. There are many, one other issue is that although Hokkien is the most widespread, it's not the only one. The Cantonese, Hokkien, Hakka, Teochew are the local dialects. The reality is that young people, most young people speak Chinese and they speak Mandarin. And
okay,
that is,
and James is asking, is all the data based on reading or is there spontaneous speech?
Right, we do a combination of reading and spontaneous speech. I try not to do too much on reading. Reading has advantages because you can compare the same text. But we do have, in the book we had both reading and spontaneous speech, and we looked at both of them. Some of the things I was presenting was obviously was reading, because I gave you the passage and I gave you the same sentence from 4 different speakers. But in the conversation about the negative answers, affirmative answers to negative questions, that was an interview. And we had interviews with, I think, 57 students. So we had interviews, we had a conversation between 2 people, and read speech. We have a combination of all 3 in the book, 2013 book, yeah.
Okay, Stephen's typed up a long question. I guess I can read it out.
I can see it now. Let me see.
I have a question about the use of Jawi in Brunei. Is there any, Stephen, do you want to read your question?
Yeah, okay, so this was a question about whether the Jawi, which is the Arabic-based script that has to be twice the size of Rumi, which is the Roman-based script, whether there is any effort to adapt it to recognize the local way in which Malay language is used, or do they rely entirely on the standards of Malay that are used in Peninsular Malaya?
Okay.
So with words that are pronounced differently in Brunei, they'd still write them as if they were standard Malay.
It would definitely would. I don't think I've ever seen, and I would be quite surprised to see Brunei Malay written in Jawi. There was nothing to stop it being written in Jawi, because Brunei Malay doesn't have any sounds that don't occur in standard Malay. I think that's correct. So it would be perfectly possible to do it. But basically, Brunei Malay is never written. So the Jawi always would represent Standard Malay. I think that's correct. But I mean, in the future, maybe we'll find Jawi used to write Brunei Malay. I mean, Jawi and Rumi are saying the same thing. It's, there should be no difference, really. You can read it from left to right or right to left, and you get the same reading.
Well, except that the Jawi doesn't always mark the vowels, which
I think they
weeny bit harder.
I don't know whether I believe in Jawi they do. In Arabic they don't. I believe in Jawi they do mark the vowels. But I need to check that actually. I can't read Jawi. I'm ashamed to admit I can't read it. They have modified.
Yeah.
Do you know the answer? Do you?
Well, no. Some of the words that I was reading before did appear not to have vowels written in them.
Okay, well, maybe you're correct. And I really don't know the answer to that. What I do know is, I'm ashamed to know I don't know the answer to that. I do know that the Arabic had to be modified to allow for about 4 or 5 extra consonants, particularly the voiceless closed, ETK. They've had to modify the Arabic script to represent those. There are 2 others, and I can't remember which ones they are. But I believe that sometimes, I honestly don't know. I should know that, whether the vowels are shown in the Jawi. I think sometimes they are, but usually they're not. Maybe that's the answer. Yeah, you're probably right that they're not. Yeah. Okay. Right.
Sorry, I muted myself there. Nobody's typed any other questions, so if that's the case, I might ask a couple. And we had some phoneticians' ears on here. So in no particular order, I wanted to ask, sorry, I'd never heard Chinese described as rhotic. I know about the apical vowels, the so-called apical vowels, but if you could just explain what rhotic means.
Okay, first of all, not the apical vowels as in to die. Brunei, Standard Chinese, Beijing Chinese says, instead of saying men, which is a door, a bit mer, kai mer, right? Mer.
Okay,
they have an R at the end of things. So it's quite, I mean, take the word, do you speak Chinese? You speak something?
No.
Okay, well, let me count to 3. San. Is 2. But in Beijing, it would be R. So it has an R at the end, okay? So what you have in Beijing is you have some words like men, which is pronounced as mer, and you have words which are spelt the ER in Pinyin script, which actually in Brunei, in Singapore, in Taiwan are pronounced as but in Beijing they're pronounced as R. Very heavily, and in fact, Beijing Mandarin is incredibly rhotic, which is quite surprising. But but nobody in the rest of the world, nobody in Singapore, Taiwan, Brunei speaks like that. And if you speak like that, they think, oh gosh, you come from. It's
okay. I didn't know. Sorry, wasn't aware of that dialectal variation. And the people on the chat are also commenting on. Yeah, they seem to have been aware of it. It was just my ignorance. Okay. And the other thing was, as I was listening to the examples, I thought that the rhoticity was more common on the word chorus rather than the other 2 words. And I wondered about any possible influence of the fact that it was the only closed syllable. The other 2 were open syllables.
I forget what the other words are. We usually find that it's, okay, I think there were 3 things. There was coarse, before, and better.
Yes. Right.
Better with the least rhoticity because it's an unstressed syllable.
Yep.
The one that actually overall has the most rhoticity is before, an open syllable. But I only gave you a small sample.
Okay.
The overall, we usually find more rhoticity in open syllables or open stressed syllables than closed syllables. Though in the more recent sample that my student Noor Raihan did, she found that in fact closed syllables now have an equal rhoticity or maybe even a little more. But,
Okay.
yes, it does vary. It does vary.
I'd be curious, you know, for ethnicities developing, what environments is it developing in? I also wonder if the back vowel context is facilitating.
I think that there's a lot of things to look at. Yes, it's whether the syllable is stressed or not, whether it's open or closed vowel, where the word occurs in a sentence, the end of a sentence, the end of an utterance, or in the middle of an utterance, and what the preceding vowel is. It's all of those things, whether it's or, are, or basically. All of those issues would have an impact on rhoticity. You're right.
Yeah, interacting factors. That's good. And Olga made an interesting point. She said that I can't find her comment now, precise wording, but Olga will correct me. She's just put her face on that phrasal accent on function words is more likely to bring about full vowels. Olga, did I phrase that?
Yes, I've got it there. Lack of vowel reduction in function words is also linked to phrasal prominence, accent prominence. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, on is, yeah, my feeling is that probably, this is another thing I don't know. My feeling is that they don't make a distinction between phrasal verbs and compounds, the terminology. So we would stress, we would have a full vowel on phrasal verbs, but not on verb plus preposition. I think that's so. Look up would have a full vowel, but sit on would not, or it's a bad example. But my feeling is probably in Brunei they don't make a distinction between those two kinds of verbs, phrasal verbs and verbs with a preposition following them.
I think Olga was talking more generally about the placement of phrasal accents, pitch accents. Is that, or pitch accents or phrasal boundary tones or whatever is appropriate. I won't put words in Olga's mouth. She can speak for herself.
No, it was fascinating. Thank you for the great talk. Because when I was listening to those examples, I think it was clear that the function words were accented. So they were actually accented within a phrase. And I think it seems to be quite a feature of New Englishes, and that probably would explain the use of function, the lack of vowel reduction in function words also.
I think that's right, yeah. My honest feeling is that more syllables are stressed and more words are stressed. So they get phrasal accents throughout. We also find, I mean, another thing which may or may not be related is there's quite often quite strong prominence for the last word in a sentence. So what are you looking at? They would never ever say that. What are you looking at? It was always what are you looking at? Also pronouns. I saw him. You would never say I saw him. It's I saw him. So function words at the end of a sentence would often get stressed, but in the middle of a sentence as well. Yes, indeed. There's much less reduction of words, reduction of syllables throughout the language. And again, I tell my students, if you have a full vowel in your function words, then keep it. Why not? One of the things is that my students say, of course, or they have of, not of, and they would say they should have gone. They would never say should have gone, or would have gone, could have gone. They don't have of, which means they never misspell it. Whereas people in Britain and Australia and everywhere misspell have as of, could have. My students would never do that because have is not pronounced as of. You can't confuse have and of if you pronounce them as have and of. So I often tell my students they speak more clearly than me. I have to learn to. So many times I remember. I asked a student, where did you go on your last vacation? He said, what? I said, where did you go on your last vacation? I had to stress it because he misheard it as vocation, because I pronounce them the same, but he doesn't. He has vacation and vocation. And I should remember not to say vacation because it's confusing. Anyway, that's a, yes, indeed. Thank you. Function words are often receive an accent and often are quite prominent, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm just conscious of time, and we look like, you know, we've had some great discussion. Thank you, everyone.
just
David?
before everyone goes, can I just mention that we don't have a La Trobe seminar, linguistic seminar next week, but we will have a couple of seminars coming up at the end of June. I think it'll be the 18th and also the 25th of June, and I'll be letting everyone know about those in due course. I think, Caroline, you're going to be on the 18th, so that will be our next seminar presentation.
Okay, but we do have, the invitation was sent for David Bradley's 8 a.m.
Correct.
next
Yes.
week, Wednesday the 3rd.
Yes, so did everyone get that, the invitation to the presentation that David is doing at 8 a.m. Melbourne time, which will be, I think, a rather unfriendly time in Brunei.
Yeah, that might be a little bit early, but we can see.
I think those seminars that are being done by the Linguistic Society of Brazil are also being retained on YouTube and can be watched back later. But if you want to join it live, you'll have to get up early.
Okay, well, I'll think about that. Yes, certainly.
Yes.
It'll be 6 o'clock in the morning, but it's
Right.
just about dawn, so it won't be exactly dark at that time.
Well, like Simon says, it's on the YouTube. Okay, so thank you very much for your presentation. So yeah, we look forward to seeing you